Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with a viewer request. Now it was following on from our little sort of mini spools or spools mini wall hanging, and I saw in the viewer comments we had somebody that says, have you got any sizes for any larger blocks? And I thought, yes I have. So we thought we'd do a little tutorial on it. Now what I've done is I've worked out sizes for 5 other sized blocks. So this was 6-inch finish, so the 4 together make a 12-inch block. And if I just put that one down there, these that were the blocks that we had in that tutorial. Now that's already been filmed, so we'll put a link to that in the description so anybody that's interested can go and have a look how we did these. And the centre square on these was a 3.5-inch square, and we used 1.5-inch strips to make that. So that was sort of from my scraps to do sort of a scrappy one. And I decided at that point that that's going to be my scrap quilt for next year, or when I've finished my pineapple scrap quilt, using sort of my scraps from that for those. And I'm probably going to set them in sets of 4. So that's the 6-inch version. Using a 3.5-inch square. Now I've got this written down because no way I can remember all of these numbers. These top pieces were 2-inch by 6 inches, 6.5 inches, sorry. The side bits were 2 inches by 3.5, and then we had some 2-inch squares. So that was the 6-inch version. So what I've also done for you all, so just put that one to one side, is I've done an 8-inch version. And you can see on this one that what I've used is strips again, but one of the other viewer comments we had was, oh, you could use your string blocks for that. And all a string block is for any beginner quilters is where you take your scraps and you normally sew them, and they could be sort of quite small strips, and you normally sew them onto a foundation piece of paper, or it could be like by interfacing. Some people sew them to interfacing, but it's a way of utilising your scraps to make basically another piece of fabric. And that's what I've done here for this 8-inch version. And for the 8-inch version, you need a 4.5-inch square for the centre. And I just use my different strips, and you can see there, they're different widths, just to make enough that I could cut my 4.5-inch square out of that. So that would also be a really good one for a sort of a scrappy version. But to be honest, all of these sizes would be good for a scrappy version. So that uses 4.5. These pieces are 2.5 by 4.5. This is 2.5 by 8.5, and the squares for the corners would be 2.5. But like I say, you don't have to, I'm not going to go through all of the measurements for all of these because they are in the little download that you can go and have a look. I've done a little chart for you all with it all in. So that's the 8-inch finished version. I'm going to demo on a 9-inch version, and the 9-inch version uses 5-inch squares. So it uses a charm pack. So grab yourself a charm pack, and you've got 42 squares for the centre of 42 blocks, so 5 inches, and the strip widths for that are 2 3/4. So that's sort of the measurements for that. Like I say, I won't go through all the details. You can have a look in the download if you're interested. So we'll do that one together in a minute. So that's going to be the 9-inch version. I did also work out sizes for a 10-inch version. I haven't done a sample for that one because it's going to be probably quite similar to the 9-inch version. But then I also put together a 12-inch version. And I had so much fun doing this because I grabbed my 2.5 and I brought it in to show, because I talked about this probably about a year ago now. What I do when I'm cutting is, if I've got a little bit of fabric left, I will cut some random 2.5-inch squares, and they all go into this little box. And when this box gets full, that's my prompt to Jeanette, you need to do something with your 2.5-inch squares. So there's all sorts of oddments of 2.5-inch squares in this. And I thought, actually, this would be a really good one to utilise some of those 2.5-inch squares out of my box to make the spools block. Now, the other interesting thing with this size block is that's a 6.5-inch block, or 6-inch finished. So any 6-inch finished quilt block will work in the centre of that. I was thinking like a nice hourglass block would look good in there. Maybe even like a little mini star block would look really good in there. So with all of these spool blocks, you know, as long as you sort of stick to the measurements of the sizes, you've got lots of scope to play, you know, to use your pre-cut fabrics, to use your scraps. You can really sort of go to town with all of these. And I enjoyed this one so much. And if you notice, I've made it in very similar fabrics and colours to these, because I think what I'm going to do with my scrap quilt next year is mix together some 12-inch and the 6-inch blocks to have those 2 different sizes in that. So thank you for that viewer request doing that, because that sort of led me to another idea of how my scrap quilt for next year is going to evolve. So let me just put all of that to one side so we've got a little bit of room to work here. So I hope that's given you some ideas anyway. And like I say, we'll put a link and you'll be able to go onto our website and download the instructions for all the different sizes. I will say, yeah, that it's a 6.5 inch finished on the 12 inch. And I think you use 3.5 inch strips, the width of the strips that you need for that one as well. Okay, so we're going to have a look at how to make the 9 inch block. As I said, it uses a 5 inch square at the centre. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to have a look at some charm packs. And we've just selected a few different ones here. We've got some nice summery ones. Let me just do this. So this is Jeanette Claire, and this is quite an unusual one for Jeanette Claire, because I know she's very well known for all her sort of her blues and her greens, but this is very fresh and very summery. Gorgeous. So let's say if you were doing any of these with sort of summer blocks, these would look absolutely fabulous with the browns and more pinks. I love that one with the lilacs and it's sort of like a peachy pink there in the background. But there are some lovely sort of fabrics in these. These are a bit lighter, so you may want to think about what you're going to do for your contrast colour, but it doesn't always have to be a light background. You can sort of set them against a darker background. That's definitely another different look. Sherry and Chelsea, always fabulous, fabulous fabrics. I love their colours. They're always sort of bright and fresh. Look at that lovely blue. I'm a magpie for blue, as you all know. But just really, really gorgeous. I think this one actually would go in really well with my scrap quilt. So I might have to put some Sherry and Chelsea fabric into that one. But just some lovely, lovely colours there. And then you've got your lights or your low volumes there at the front. But definitely all of those lovely colours. I say that would definitely work in with the blocks that I'm doing. So that's called Emma. Sorry, I should have said the other one by Jeanette Claire is called Bloomin' Lovely. I don't know. Did I go a bit Cockney there? Probably not. Cornish maid going a bit Cockney. The other one we've got here is Lydia's Lace by Betsy Cutchin, 1840 to 1880. Very much more sort of the traditional. I love these fabrics as well. I keep saying it, I love all fabric. You all know that by now. I love all the fabrics, all the colours in all the fabrics, but some just really nice, lovely prints. Look at that lovely rich blue. You know I'm going to pull out the blue, don't you? But nice browns as well. Actually, that would go really well. I'm doing a split 9-patch quilt in these sorts of colours. That would go well in that. So that's Lydia's Lace, 1840 to 1880. So very much reproduction fabrics there. And then Kath Holden, I mean, this is, you know, she's just an absolute classic, isn't she, with all her lovely fabrics. I mean, that one on top is just absolutely gorgeous. But these are really sort of nice, bold, strong colours with really lots of interest. So these would look fabulous in the centre of these spool blocks for a 9-inch square spool block. But, you know, I think nearly all the colours of the rainbow in this. But I just love the way she sort of collages her fabrics together as well. You just get loads and loads of interest in that. So that's a really lovely one as well. So I just wanted to share those with you just to give you some ideas of some sort of different looks that you could go for. So let's just set those aside. Look, now I've got lots of little fluffy bits all over my mat. But we'll just... It made me laugh. I was watching somebody the other day do this and they said, "I'll just tidy up," and they just took all their mess and just moved it across their mat, which I thought was brilliant. It's like, yeah, that's sort of the tidying up I do sometimes. So the size pieces for these that you're going to need. 5-inch squares we've spoken about. That's going to be for the centre of the spools block. For the 2 rectangles either side, these are 2 3/4 by 5 inch. So these side pieces are always going to be the height of your centre square. It's the width of them that changes throughout all of the blocks. So they're going to go on. Actually, if I do that, that'll be easier to sew. Straight edge with straight edge. And then for the top and bottom of the spools, that piece is 2 3/4. So the side and the top and bottom, the width stays the same. And those are always going to be the size of your unfinished block. So that's 9.5. So we've got those two, and you can probably spot this fabric. These were leftover pieces of fabric that I had when I did the Strippy tote bag. And I think we had a question in the comments that said, what fabric is it? It is a French General, and this one in particular is Le Jardin de Fleurs, I think, Garden of Flowers. So, and then for the corners, to snowball these corners, we're going to be using 2 3/4 squares. So let's start that first. So that's how our block's going to lay out. So let's start by drawing our diagonal line on the back of our squares. Right, I can put my book away now that I just had that there in case I forgot any of the sizes, because my memory is not what it was. And we're just going to do a diagonal line, corner to corner, on all 4 pieces. I think this plain fabric I'm using here, or contrast fabric I'm using, was also from that Le Jardin de Fleurs. So I made all of these blocks exactly the same way. It was just the centre block sort of differed how I made the centre blocks in each of them. But I say that's really where you can sort of play around and have some fun. And then on these, we just have to watch that we're getting these diagonal lines going in the right direction. So on the top one, I mean, it doesn't really matter because you can turn them around, but one needs to come from top right to bottom left, and one needs to go from top left to bottom right. So they're sort of coming together. So let me put that under the close-up so you can see that there. So there we've got our top right to bottom left, and on this side we've got top left to bottom right. So I'm just going to pin this because then we can take it all to the machine and sew. And then this one, we do the same thing. And then that will be the bit that goes up against the spool block. Ooh, I need that bit of fabric. All right, just check that I'm getting that right. But these were so much fun. I'm chomping at the bit, as they say. I'm really, dagging. I'm really eager to work on these blocks, but I'm being very disciplined and saying, no, Jeanette, you've got to finish your pineapple blocks first. But I so want to be making these. But anyway, we'll get to that. Right, let's take them to the machine. Now for this, we're just going to sew slightly to the edge of that line. Now, we call it kissing the line, and I need to mention, because I went back and I reread the comment from the person who said, and it's a lady called Brenda from Conquering Mount Scrapmore that calls it kissing the line. So I felt I needed to name check her. I had a quick look at her channel, and she does a lot with scrap as well. But yeah, she's the one that calls it kissing the line. So I did look at that. I think the hover feature of this machine's been switched off. And I think I've just remembered how to switch it on. I'm still getting used to using this machine. It's still quite new for me. And I said last time, if you start from this flatter edge, it's easier than starting at the point sometimes. Sometimes your machine tends to push that corner of that fabric into the throat plate a bit more. This one isn't too bad because it's a bit of a bigger block. Now, while I'm at the machine, I'm actually going to put these side pieces on, I think. Just checking which way that fabric goes. So on this, we are just using our 1/4 inch seam. Now we can take all these pieces to the iron. And I'm going to press towards the side rectangles. Now on these, just before I press, I'm just going to check that I'm happy with how they've come out. So now I'm just going to press that corner back. Right, there we are. Now we've got our two pieces. So all we need to do now is just cut off the excess fabric. Now what I tend to do when I'm making these blocks is sort of go back in with a ruler and just check they're coming out to size, because this isn't a perfect way of adding sort of those pieces to the corners. So there sometimes is some slight discrepancies in that. So I do just check that I'm still happy with the size that it's all coming out at. Once you've done a few, if you're making sort of quite a lot of these, you'll probably start to sort of tell, yep, I'm sort of spot on that or not. But none of these ever come out perfect. But we don't aim for perfect, we just aim for good enough. As long as it all comes out, looks nice. Perfection is not why we do this, or it's certainly not why I do it. So I'm just cutting 1/4 of an inch away from that stitched line. And just to reiterate why we sort of kiss the line and don't sew on it, because I know that was a sort of question in the comments, is just to allow for that fold so that our fabric still meets the corner. If we sew on the line, sometimes we can be a little bit short, which some people don't mind because that does come out in your seam allowance, but it does mean that you haven't got sort of the accuracy in your block, which makes it easier to piece things together if you've got that. So now the other way I put these on, and partly to do with how we make those, they're called snowball. Some people call them flip and stitch corners. Some people call them sew and stitch. No, sew and flip. Is because these points aren't always perfect. They're not always going to match the centre block. So I don't try. I don't try very hard. What I do is I just find the centre, because I think actually if it's centred in the block, it'll look good enough for me. So I find the centre of that block. I find the centre of that block, and you could measure it, but I just tend to fold in half. And then I'm just going to line the two up. And that will make sure that this sort of the top of the spools element lines up. Now the beauty with using just a solid piece of fabric in these is it goes much quicker, but I enjoy the fun of the scrappy blocks, making the scrappy blocks. So, right, and once again, and you just need to make sure you're putting the smaller edge against the centre of the block. Now I should have creased that line when I had it folded in half earlier, shouldn't I? Never mind, we can do it again. And then we're just going to line those up. So I've just got the centre of that block, so I'll just try and get that under the close-up. The centre of that block lined up with the centre of that block. And I'm not going to worry too much if these don't come out perfectly lined up with there. As long as it's centre, it will look good enough. And particularly if I'm doing a scrappy block. There are times to worry about such things and time when it's not. So we're going to take those to the machine. I'm going to do another 1/4 of an inch seam on both of those. Take our pins out. Now there's our block. Now we've come out pretty good on the match points. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So we're going to take that to the iron and give it a press, and then that's that block done. So there's our 9-inch block. So a lot faster because we've just used that solid centre, and there's no reason why in a scrappy quilt you couldn't mix and match this. You can have some solid centres, you can have some that are pieced with your scraps in sort of strips, you could have some with squares. It really is, particularly sort of a scrappy one, it's really up to you. So let's just lay these out so you can sort of see the differences in sizes. Ooh, can't pick that one up. So that's our 6-inch, so you can see the difference between the 6 and the 8-inch. That's our 9-inch. I didn't do the 10-inch, but it's going to be slightly bigger again to that one, so it's going to be quite similar size to the 9-inch. And of course, there's our big daddy 12-inch ones at the end. So that's the different block sizes. So for the viewer that requested that, I hope that's covered it. I hope I've given you a size there that you feel you can work with. Certainly when it comes to those big 12 inches, you know, you can whip up a quick quilt quite quickly, because that's a lot of cues for that one. That comes together really quite quickly. So yeah, you can have a sort of a quilt in sort of no time whatsoever really using that. But as I said, I'm probably going to be doing a combination of those two in my scrappy quilt. So it's going to look like quite good fun. So I hope you enjoyed that. As I said, I hope that's answered the query. I hope you'll give it a go. Like I say, go and grab the download and have a play with some lovely spools blocks. And now you've got a choice of 5 different sizes to use as well. So have fun with it. Thank you for spending some time here with me today. And I hope you'll join me again here next time in the sewing studio.
We love to see what you've been creating, using techniques learned from our tutorials and using materials purchased from us. We also love to inspire other makers within our community by showing what's possible via our email newsletter and on social media. So if you'd like us to showcase your beautiful works of art, then send it to us using the contact details in the description below or tag us on any of your socials.